Do you struggle with remembering what you read? You're not alone. Many of us experience the same issue. We read a paragraph, a page, or even an entire book, only to forget the key details shortly thereafter. Indeed, forgetting seems to be a part of our nature. Studies suggest that within 1 hour of learning something new, people on average forget nearly 50% of that information. By the end of a week, that number can climb to 90%. It's a common problem, but it doesn't have to be this way. There are strategies and techniques that can help us retain more of what we read. The capacity to remember is not just about innate talent, it's a skill that can be developed and improved. Knowing how to retain information effectively is a vital skill in today's information-driven society. But why do we forget what we read? A question that has puzzled many of us. Let's delve into the fascinating world of our memory to understand this better. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss future videos. Our brain is a complex organ, and memory formation is an intricate process. It involves 3 key stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. The first step, encoding, is when the brain converts information into a construct that can be stored. Then, during the storage phase, this construct is held in the brain. Finally, in the retrieval stage, the brain accesses this stored information when required. However, not all information makes it through these stages. Factors such as focus, repetition, association, and emotional engagement play crucial roles in determining what we remember and what we forget. Think of your memory as a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. This is where repetition comes in. By going over the same piece of information repeatedly, we strengthen the neural pathways in our brain associated with that information, making it easier to recall. Association is another powerful tool for memory retention. Our brains are excellent at making connections. When we link new information to something we already know, it becomes easier to remember. This is why you might recall a fact about a historical figure when it's related to a personal experience or a well-known story. Lastly, emotional engagement. Our brains are naturally drawn to things that elicit strong emotions. Have you ever noticed how you can remember every detail about a book that made you cry or a movie that made you laugh? That's your brain prioritizing information that comes with emotional significance. So, forgetting is not a flaw in our brain's design, but rather a feature. It allows us to filter out unnecessary information and focus on what's important. But by understanding how memory works and using strategies like repetition, association, and emotional engagement, we can tip the scales in favor of retention. Understanding these concepts is the first step towards improving your memory retention. Remember, knowledge is power, and knowing how your memory works is the first step to becoming a master of information retention. One of the first techniques we'll discuss is active reading. Now, you might be wondering, what is active reading? Simply put, it's the process of fully engaging with the text you're reading. It's not just skimming through the words, but actively seeking to understand the content, asking questions, making notes, and creating mental images. Active reading is a workout for your brain, calling into action different parts of your noodle. When you actively read, you engage your prefrontal cortex, responsible for understanding complex ideas, and your hippocampus, the part of your brain that's all about memory. And here's the thing about memory: the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Active reading helps in retaining information by pushing your brain to process and reprocess information, strengthening the neural connections. It's like lifting weights, but for your brain. So, next time you pick up a book or an article, remember, active reading is not just reading with your eyes, but engaging your mind. Next up is the Feynman Technique. Named after the brilliant physicist Richard Feynman, this method is a fantastic tool for enhancing your memory retention. The Feynman Technique is all about comprehension and explanation. Here's how it works. First, pick a concept you're trying to understand. Now, in your own words, describe this concept as if you were explaining it to someone else. This could be your friend, your grandma, or even an imaginary 5-year-old. The key is to break it down into the simplest terms. Why does this work? Well, when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. You're not just regurgitating information, you're actively engaging with it. This process of translation and simplification helps to solidify your understanding. Remember, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. This is the essence of the Feynman Technique. It's a powerful tool that can transform your reading into an active, engaging process. The Feynman Technique is about understanding, not just memorizing. Another powerful technique is spaced repetition. Now, what is this spaced repetition we speak of? Imagine you're learning a new language. You learn a new word today. Instead of restudying it tomorrow, you wait a few days. Then you review it again after a week, then a month, and so on. This is spaced repetition in a nutshell. Rather than cramming all your study into one marathon session, spaced repetition involves breaking your study into smaller, manageable chunks and spacing them out over time. This technique leverages a concept known as the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve, proposed by psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, suggests that our memory of new information decreases rapidly at first, but the rate of forgetting slows down over time. So, if you learn something new today, you are most likely to forget it within the next few days unless you review it. That's where spaced repetition comes in. By reviewing the information at increasing intervals, we reset the forgetting curve, making it less steep each time. This means that we retain the information for longer periods. But why does this work? Well, every time you recall a piece of information, you're essentially strengthening the neural pathways in your brain associated with that information. By spacing out your study sessions, you give your brain the chance to forget and then relearn the information, which strengthens these pathways even further. Now, you may be thinking, I don't have time for all this reviewing. But the beauty of spaced repetition is that it actually saves you time in the long run. Because you're working with your brain's natural forgetting curve instead of against it, you're making your study sessions more efficient. You're retaining more information in less time. In essence, spaced repetition is not about learning fast, it's about learning smart. It's about understanding how our memory works and using that knowledge to our advantage. So, whether you're learning a new language or studying for a big exam, give spaced repetition a try. After all, spaced repetition is about working with your brain's natural forgetting curve, not against it. Last, but certainly not least, is visual imagery. This is a powerful technique that leverages our brain's natural preference for visuals. By nature, our minds are attracted to images, colors, and patterns, much more than abstract concepts or plain text. Visual imagery is all about transforming information into vivid mental pictures. Imagine you're trying to remember a complex theory or concept. Instead of wrestling with abstract ideas, you could visualize them as a series of interconnected images. Perhaps you're recalling the events of a historical period. You might picture it as a timeline, with significant events represented as striking, unforgettable illustrations. This technique is not just about creating arbitrary images. It's about crafting visuals that resonate with you personally, visuals that stir your emotions and ignite your imagination. By doing this, you create a deeper connection with the information, making it easier to recall when needed. So, next time you're reading a hefty tome or a complex report, remember to paint those mental pictures. Visual imagery is about painting mental pictures to make information more memorable. Now, let's quickly recap the techniques we've covered today. First up, we delved into the world of active reading. This isn't your ordinary, run-of-the-mill reading. It's reading with a purpose, with engagement. It's about asking questions, making connections, and really diving deep into the material. It's not just about consuming text, it's about interacting with it, wrestling with it, and extracting meaning from it. Active reading allows you to transform passive absorption into active understanding, making that information stick in your mind. Next, we explored the Feynman Technique, named after the brilliant physicist Richard Feynman. This technique is all about learning by teaching. After you've read something, try to explain it in your own words, as if you were teaching it to someone else. If you stumble or find gaps in your understanding, you go back to the source material. By doing this, you're not just memorizing facts, you're understanding concepts, and that's much more powerful. Then, we discussed the power of spaced repetition. This technique is based on the idea that we learn more effectively when we space out our study sessions over time. Instead of cramming all your learning into one marathon session, you spread it out, reviewing the material at increasing intervals. This method has been shown to significantly improve long-term recall, making it easier for you to remember what you've read. Finally, we touched on the role of visual imagery in memory retention. By creating vivid mental pictures of the information you're trying to remember, you can make your learning more meaningful and memorable. Think of it like turning your memory into a vibrant, colorful movie, instead of a dull, black and white text. With these techniques, you are well on your way to mastering the art of retaining information. Remember, practice is key. So, go ahead and put these techniques to the test.